Hi, everybody, and welcome to Ivy English. I'm Karen.
I'm Chris Gorski.
Today is June 21st, and we're on page 61 in your magazines. And today we're going to talk about a widely beloved children's story.
Yeah, this is called Charlotte's Web, and this is the number one most widely read book in third grade. So if you have kids that maybe in the future will go study in the United States, or you have family, they will have read this book by third or fourth grade. It's everywhere.
So it's specifically third grade. I didn't know that.
This is the reading level, yeah. So I was a teacher in the U.S., and you get kind of book list recommendations, what it's suitable for. Of course, you can be a fourth or fifth grader or a full-on adult and enjoy this book, but it's recommended for third grade.
Right. And I asked Chris if he had read it. He said, yes, he had it read to him in third grade.
Right.
And I did the same to my children. I read it to my kids.
You know, interestingly, my cousin is just finishing up her librarian studies, and I know this is a book she's working with right now. So it's very appropriate that we're talking about this.
That's right. And also, there are some really strong and interesting things in this book that you don't always find in children's literature. We're going to find out more about that today when we get to our article. So, our title today is Charlotte's Web. And our first paragraph, written by E.B. White, Charlotte's Web is a classic work of children's literature. Although it was first published nearly 70 years ago, it remains as popular as ever. In addition to the colorful artwork that accompanies some printings, the book is held in high regard because it enlightens children about some of the harsher realities of life.
The book's author, E.B. White, hailed from upstate New York. As a child, he developed a love for animals and the great outdoors. In 1925, he started writing articles for The New Yorker, a highly respected U.S. magazine that discusses American culture. White would continue writing for the publication for the next 60 years and also help revise and update the Elements of Style, a prized resource that sets grammar rules and offers style advice to writers. However, it is his children's novels for which White is best remembered. His first was Stuart Little, a story about a rat raised by human parents. Although that book would eventually become a classic, he found the most success with Charlotte's Web. Over the years, it won the Newbery Medal and several other prestigious awards.
The main protagonist of the story is a pig named Wilbur. Born into a seemingly cruel world, he is almost killed at birth because he's the runt of the litter. Luckily, Fern Arable, the farmer's young daughter, begs for his life. She raises him with love until he grows larger. Shortly thereafter, Fern's father sells Wilbur to another farm where all of the animals neglect him, with the exception of an older barn spider named Charlotte. She enjoys his playfulness and youthful energy, and the two quickly become good friends. I don't know about you. When I read this, I've got all kinds of pictures in my head.
Yeah, if you look at the cover of Charlotte's Web, I think the artist did a good job by being a little bit understated because the animals look like animals and not people.
Right.
Yeah, in fact, just to share a quick story, when you look at the pictures of the spider in Charlotte's Web, it looks like a spider, which are not cute, cuddly animals. The artist originally wanted the spider to look like the Mona Lisa.
Whoa,
right, but
I didn't know that.
Yeah, E.B. White said, let's make it look like a spider.
Yeah.
Let's let Wilbur be a pig. Let the animals be animals.
That's interesting because I find spiders just fine. They're good looking to me. I like spiders, and people find that really strange. I have a friend, an older male friend, who is deathly afraid of spiders, and I don't get what the big deal is because they often provide companionship when I'm at my computer. They do.
You know, I wasn't thinking you were going in that direction, but later we'll actually share a story where E.B. White feels the same way.
And it's really true. They're not like cockroaches. It's really hard to like cockroaches. I don't know anybody who does. But spiders are a different matter. For one thing, they eat other bugs.
Yeah. You know, honestly, I don't kill animals or bugs. If I catch a bug in my house, I put it outside. Same with spiders. I don't like cockroaches. I'll catch it and put it outside. but I am very unenthusiastic about it. You are 100% right about it.
Okay, let's get back to paragraph 1. Written by E.B. White, Charlotte's Web is a classic work of children's literature. That's a pretty easy sentence to start out with. It begins with a participial phrase with the past participle written. Now, we don't know what it's modifying yet. We've just started out with this phrase that's telling us something about something. We don't know what yet. This particular thing was written by E.B. White. That's the first thing we know. Comma. Then we find out what it's modifying. It's the book Charlotte's Web. And it's a classic work. That means that just about everybody agrees that if you're a kid, you should read this book at some point of children's literature. So there's lots and lots of children's books around, but this is one that you definitely should include in your collection.
This book has a very interesting beginning, and I think it's always important for a book to have a strong first line. But I think the first line from Charlotte's Web is especially memorable. So the first line goes, "Where's Papa going with that axe?"
Wow, right. That is a strong first line.
Right. You see that axe, Dad is going somewhere, you're a little boy or a little girl, and you're wondering, what does this mean? It sets the voice for this story from the very first sentence.
And it is not an empty threat. Something bad was really about to happen.
Yeah, absolutely.
Although it was first published nearly 70 years ago, it remains as popular as ever. Now, that's a good phrase to memorize, as popular as ever. That means that it has not gone down in popularity. It's just as popular as it was years ago when lots of people were already reading it soon after it was written.
You know, the book was first written in 1952. He started writing it, I think, in 1949, when America was moving further and further away from its farming past. America was long an agrarian society, meaning a society based on farmers. But when White had left New York City to live on his farm, which we'll learn more about later, you know, he was kind of capturing this disappearing America, which I think reminds me a little bit of our Grandma Moses story from last month.
That's right. That's right. And we had just come out of World War II then, and the U.S. and the world was modernizing really fast. Okay, next sentence. In addition to the colorful artwork that accompanies some printings, the book is held in high regard because it enlightens children about some of the harsher realities of life. Now, this is something that we started talking about at the beginning of the program, that a lot of books try to make the world seem like peaches and cream. But the world is not peaches and cream all the time.
Yeah, they're always looking for a happy ending. And this book is not afraid to talk about difficult subjects. When we talk about harsher realities, we mean the hard lessons of life.
And another thing we mentioned was the illustrations in the book, at least some printings of the book. There were many different printings that had different illustrators making the drawings. But in some of the printings, like Chris said, the drawings were minimalist. Minimalist, we'll spell that. Minimal is the very least of something. Minimal, M-I-N-I-M-A-L, and then add I-S-T, M-I-N-I-M-A-L-I-S-T, very minimalist. That means they were not really elaborate and fancy, and as Chris said, they didn't look like cartoons. They looked more like real creatures.
The book's author, E.B. White, hailed from upstate New York. As a child, he developed a love for animals and the great outdoors.
To hail from somewhere just means to come from somewhere. H-A-I-L, hail. He hails from Missouri, or he hails from Taiwan. That just means to come from. But it's a fancier way to say it, so you might not want to use it in casual conversation. Upstate New York, we need Chris to tell you about.
Okay, so New York State looks like a key. It's about as long as Taiwan, but it's oriented east and west. When people say New York, they think New York City.
Right.
I come from the other side of New York. For example, you know, you have Taipei and Kunming. They're really different places. I come from the other side, and we call that place Western New York. Most people from New York City say anything outside of the city is upstate because it's north of where they're from.
That's right. If somebody wants a cup of coffee, they're from New York City. And that's not the way they talk in most of New York State.
Yeah, that is. We honestly, many of us come from more of a Chicago-styled accent. I know working with a lot of different foreigners, they hear the New York, but they hear more of that Midwest accent because of how long New York State is.
Right. Midwest and also Canadian.
Yeah, absolutely true.
Okay, next sentence.
In 1925, he started writing articles for The New Yorker, a highly respected U.S. magazine that discusses American culture.
Now, The New Yorker you can find online. You have to pay to get a subscription, but you can read a few articles for free every month, and I usually do because it is such good writing. The writing is really good. But I've also read that some people like to leave issues of The New Yorker sitting around the house to impress people with. They don't always read it.
I think both of those things are true, actually. If you want to read really high-level writing, The New Yorker, The New York Times, those are great places to go if you're looking to challenge yourself with vocabulary and, honestly, intelligent discussion.
And they really stay on top of the culture.
Yeah.
The things that are happening in American culture and world culture you're going to find in The New Yorker, and it has depth.
Now, this was like in the 1920s and 30s, so this is not a time when you can just open your laptop and begin to work. E.B. White should have gone to the office, but he was a famously shy person. So they would ask him, like, hey, can you come in for this meeting? E.B. White would say no. And so it took months and months of talking to him to have him finally show up to a meeting, and even more months for him to just come into the office at all. In fact, he finally decided to only come in one day a week on Thursdays. That's it.
And he was probably more productive that way, but there's something to be said for socializing.
I think so. I guess this is his personality. He was always a bit of a shy person. When famous people came to the New Yorker office, he was very famous for going down the fire exits because they.
Oh, really?
He would escape down the fire, go down the fire escapes because he just didn't want to talk to people that were interested in his work.
I just didn't want to deal with people. Another thing about the New Yorker is they have great cartoons. Don't miss the cartoons.
Yeah, they're very famous for their cartoons. White would continue writing for the publication for the next 60 years and also help revise and update the Elements of Style, a prized resource that sets grammar rules and offers style advice to writers.
So now we see three different things that White is famous for. Number one, his children's book, especially Charlotte's Web. Second, writing for The New Yorker. And now third, and this one is really, really famous. If you continue your study of English, especially abroad, you are going to have to read this book called The Elements of Style.
Now, The Elements of Style was first written in 1919, which means it's in the public domain. You can get this book for free online. So if you're interested in the original version, just go online, type in free Elements of Style, and there it is.
But one thing to be careful of is don't think you have to follow the rules slavishly. They're just background, they're suggestions, they're reference.
You know, Karen, I was dying to talk to you about this.
Yeah.
So you're a professor and you are very interested in language and thinking about writing. The Elements of Style is the number one most recommended book in American universities. So I'm interested in your personal feelings on this book.
I think that you have to read it. If you want to do good writing in English, you have to read this book. It doesn't mean that you follow everything to the letter, but you have to know about this book because everyone else is going to talk about it. And if you want to have an intelligent conversation, you need to know this book. But once you have it sort of in your head as a reference, then you can kind of expand on your own.
You can buy this book secondhand really cheap, too.
Oh, that's right.
Now, Dorothy Parker was a poet in America, and she said this famous quote about the Elements of Style. She said, if you have any young friends who aspire, who want to become writers, the second greatest favor you can do for them is present them with copies of the Elements of Style. The first greatest, of course, is shoot them now while they're happy.
Right. Okay. So she was a humorist. She wrote a lot of very funny poems. So she's saying that actually this book hurts people because they follow the rules too closely and then their writing is not very creative.
Yeah. I think the best advice for me from the Elements of Style was make every word tell. Mm-hmm. If it's not necessary, don't use it.
That's right. And Stephen King says that too. I know another quote by Dorothy Parker.
What is it?
Girls with glasses seldom get passes.
Thank you very much.
That's so you know what Dorothy Parker is like. That means if you wear glasses, not that many men will look at you.
I think you're quite lovely.
Okay. So there's a couple more things that we can look at here. Revise and update. So it didn't just stay the way it was. They were constantly changing it, trying to make it more relevant to modern times, updating it. All right, and he also mentions that he sets grammar rules. If you speak a language natively, you actually know the grammar, but you may not know it explicitly. So this puts it on paper so you can analyze the language better. And to offer style advice. When we talk about style in writing, that means writing well, not just writing grammatically, but writing well. So he offers style advice to writers.
If you're interested in why foreigners are so worried about the passive voice, it actually comes from this book where he says avoid the passive voice.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
Right. Okay.
Next sentence, however, it is his children's novels for which White is best remembered.
And that's going to bring us to our main topic, which is Charlotte's Web. So to be remembered for something, of all the things you do, what will everybody remember most about you? Maybe we all need to ask ourselves that.
His first was Stuart Little, that was written in 1945, a story about a rat raised by human parents.
Was this book also read to you when you were a kid?
No, actually, this is maybe a little embarrassing. I didn't know Stuart Little was even a book until I started researching for this article. There were movies about it. I was not interested in them. And then let me just say something about today's and tomorrow's articles. Jamie Blackler, the author, did a really good job of making me learn something that I didn't know much about. I was like, oh, Charlotte's Web, famous book. But when I started reading more about the life of E.B. White, it was so fascinating. So, when maybe you guys learned something from us, but many times I learned so much just by looking at our articles too.
I do too.
Yeah.
Every time. That's right. Actually, I do know Stuart Little. I read it to my kids as well after Charlotte's Web. And that's because it's so widely available in Taiwan cheaply. And there's another one, The Swan's Trumpet or something.
Yeah, that one came later, right? That was after Charlotte's Web, yeah.
So I think we went through all three of those books. Okay, a story about a rat raised by human parents. So just that sentence tells you a lot about what to expect from this book.
Although that book would eventually become a classic, he found the most success with Charlotte's Web.
So I guess it resonated with a lot of people. To resonate, that means when you read it, you think, wow, yes, that's just like I feel about it. I have experiences very similar to what they describe. And resonate is spelled R-E-S-O-N-A-T-E, R-E-S-O-N-A-T-E, to resonate with someone.
Charlotte's Web was a very successful book. It has sold more than 45 million copies and translated into more than 23 languages. So almost anywhere in the world, you can find this book.
Okay, and I think all that's pretty clear. Should we move on?
Over the years, it has won the Newbery Medal and several other prestigious awards.
And some people say prestigious. Prestigious, prestigious. Both are okay. The Newbery Medal is a very prestigious award given to children's books.
There are a lot of really great books that have won the Newbery Medal. If you're ever feeling bored and need something to read, open a list of books that have won the Newbery Medal, and you are going to find something fascinating to read that maybe isn't so heavy mentally, but you're going to have a good time reading this book.
Exactly. And especially if you have kids, those are good choices for your kids.
So prestigious or prestigious is just an adjective that means something is hard to get or something that is difficult to earn, but if you do manage to do so, it's something to be proud of.
It's highly respected. In our last paragraph, the main protagonist of the story is a pig named Wilbur.
So the word protagonist, I hesitate to use the word hero because of its feelings, but it's the main character, and usually they are trying to do something good. Protagonist. The opposite of your protagonist is the antagonist. A-N-T-A-G-O-N-I-S-T. Protagonist, antagonist.
And the antagonist is the person who makes life difficult for the protagonist.
Yeah, the bad guy or the villain if you're looking for some more everyday adjectives. But honestly, protagonist and antagonist are very useful if you were to study language literature in the United States.
And if you don't have an antagonist, you don't have a story. Okay, although Chris just suggested that maybe somebody did write a story without an antagonist. Actually, I've read books like that, and they're really boring.
I don't imagine they go anywhere. It's
don't.
Almost like an experiment.
That's right. They don't. And So you need a bad guy to have fun. All right, next sentence. Born into a seemingly cruel world, he is almost killed at birth because he's the runt of the litter. Now, this is something that happens in the natural world all the time. It doesn't matter whether it's a bird or a deer or anything. If you are the smallest, the weakest, or maybe handicapped, if you have any kind of problems, you're just smaller in size, you often will be abandoned.
So the runt is the smallest of the animals in your litter. The litter is kind of like your brothers and sisters when you're an animal that has 5, 6, 3 babies. Now, why would we want to kill the runt? So we know they'll naturally die in nature. We know oftentimes mothers will reject the smallest one. But why does the farmer want to kill the runt of the litter? And the reason is because the farmer knows that the mother will probably reject it. The pig will just never grow really strong, get weak, and then die. So
will be bullied.
Right, absolutely. The bigger pigs will deny the smallest pig food, the runt food. So the farmer's thinking, well, we can kill this pig today and have an okay meal, or we just let this pig slowly starve to death. And in many ways, by killing it, he's making almost a compassionate choice. And this is coming from a person that doesn't eat animals. Killing it today may be less cruel than letting it slowly starve to death.
Showing it mercy.
Right.
Okay, so remember, litter, that's a whole bunch of babies, especially with pigs. Luckily, Fern Arable, the farmer's young daughter, begs for his life. Now, it often happens, at least you read about it a lot online, about humans intervening and wanting to save the runt of a litter.
You know, it's very interesting you mention that because Wilbur, the protagonist of Charlotte's Web, I guess Charlotte's the protagonist, right? Was based on a real pig. White lived on a farm and he had a pig, he was the runt, and he tried to save it. And the pig died and he felt really bad about this. He had planned to eat this pig, but he tried to save it. It died anyways and it hurt him. And so in some ways, people think that Wilbur, as a matter of fact, is this pig that died, and he's trying to save it through his book.
Bring it back to life. She raises him with love until he grows larger. I guess that's pretty easy. Let's move on. Shortly thereafter, Fern's father sells Wilbur to another farm where all of the animals neglect him, with the exception of an older barn spider named Charlotte. And that brings us to our story.
If you're interested in the background of Charlotte's Web, you can actually look up E.B. White's article called The Death of a Pig, which is the pig that he tried to save but died, and kind of inspired who Wilbur was. And you can see his emotions before he wrote the story.
Our last sentence for today, she enjoys his playfulness and youthful energy, and the two quickly become good friends. Now, that's kind of a big difference in size, a pig and a spider, and they're totally different species. But when I saw this playfulness and youthful energy, I thought, yep, that's exactly what pigs are. That's what you find in pigs.
So tomorrow we'll talk more about Charlotte's Web. But before we go for today, I want to end on a quote from E.B. White, and I think it really shows us what's in this man's heart. E.B. White says, "All that I hope to say in books, all that I ever hope to say, is that I love the world." I think that's
very
quite
impressive.
Touching, right? Quite touching.
A good way to live your life.
All right, so let's end it there, and we'll see you tomorrow.